Good morning. Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of Get Busy with Kit and Jim. Actually, this morning it's Get Busy without Kit and with Jim. Kit is actually in Florida, and she's making her way back to Chicago this morning. So it'll be Get Busy without Kit and with Jim. So anyways, welcome. We have a great show today. I'm super excited. So the topic of today's show is, can you change your life by changing your mindset? And I believe that you can. I personally believe it. I've manifested it a few times in my life, and I actually am in the process of working on it again as I work towards growing my business. So anyways, who's ready to change their life? Today we're not just going to talk about it, but we're actually going to show you how to take action to actually change it. And it starts really, if you're going to change your life, if you're going to do anything different in your life, it starts with your mindset, and it also starts with being mindful. Okay? So if you're stuck, if you're not really living up to your privilege, we're going to help you to take the first steps today to make a significant life change. Like I said, it starts with one simple step. The first step is actually not the hardest. It's making a conscious decision. And I also think it's important to share your conscious decision that you're making with the world, because the world will hold you accountable, when you put it out there. And I'm so happy and super stoked to be joined this week by our special guest, Manny St. Victor. Manny, hey, welcome, Manny. So Manny is a psychiatrically changed neuroscientist with a fetish for personality and persuasion science. He shakes, he stirs, he twists, and he has a blurn cognitive process for fun. So if you're up for a round of disruptive brainstorming, then you found the right Dr. Poison. He's a passionate advocate of healing power of laughter, play, creativity, mindful well-being. He first became interested in the 8 cognitive functions during his freshman year at Harvard University. During his research with Dr. Stephen Kosslyn, the father of cognitive neuroscience, he learned that imagination and perception mapped to similar brain areas. During his medical training at UNC Chapel Hill School of Medicine, he further developed an interest in the relationship between mental illness, physical illness, and lifestyle. After finishing his second year of psychiatric residency at the University of Miami, he woke up to his true path outside of clinical medicine. So welcome Manny, welcome Dream Team panel, and we have a special guest volunteer who volunteered to be with us today and be a little bit of a guinea pig on an exercise that we're going to try a little bit later. So I'm going to go down the panel and have everyone introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Benton, our guinea pig for the day, and our brave volunteer. I'm not sure if he knows what he's getting into. I'm not sure if we even know what he's getting into. But welcome, Benton. And if you wouldn't mind, take a minute here and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, sure. I am a happily married man with a wife and a daughter, a 9-year-old daughter, and a bonus daughter of 21, I believe she is now. And I work at Starbucks. I've been at Starbucks actually almost 14 years. Was a store manager, but stepped down a couple 3 years ago. And looking to take my life in a new direction. And I'm always willing to try something new. So I always definitely try anything new food-wise. So and that's pretty much it.
Awesome, Benton. Well, again, thank you for joining us. This will be really good, and I hope that we actually have something that you can take away and make a life change. That's what today's show is all about. So welcome again, and thank you for being our guinea pig in our experiment today.
It's an honor.
Hey, Christine. Good morning.
Good
How are
morning, Jim. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. I'm gonna ask everyone. Oh, I'm gonna.
Is the feedback coming from my end?
Yeah, I'm gonna mute my.
Okay, great morning to everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Dr. St. Victor is one of my favorite people on the plus, as well as the dream audience and those of you that I get to hang out with every single week. And I am excited to be here. For those of you that may not know me, I'm Christine L. Bowen, and I'm excited about this topic today because I'm the co-creator of Create Live Be, which is a mindset mission, resetting creative mindsets for success. So I am like really ready to dig in to the content today that Manny is going to be sharing with us. Thanks for having me.
Oops. That's great, Christine. Thank you for being here. I'm glad that there's definitely some synergy here, so this is going to be a great show. Hey, Kristen. Whoa. Okay. Yeah, something's really strange with your audio, so I'm going to mute you and let you get that sorted. I know.
Minnie
Never
Mouse.
heard anything. Oh, are you there? Oh, that was fun. Okay, Manny.
Yep.
Welcome.
It's my pleasure to be here, Jeff.
How's it going? How's it going this morning?
It's going great. It's a good morning in Atlanta. It's about 11 o'clock, so the sun's not directly above us baking us yet, so it's good.
Is this the season of hot Atlanta?
It's like almost always the season of Hotland.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, we get a little bit more of a winter most recently, but by and large, it's hot all year long.
Oh yeah, and you guys get the double dose. You get the hot and the humid down there, right?
Yeah, we do. Not quite like Miami, but it's bad. It's humid.
It's humid. So again, welcome to the show, Manny. I'm so stoked to have you on here. I'm kind of fascinated with neuroscience and what you've got going on. So maybe to start the show, if you can tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and what were some of the most important influences in your life growing up. So kind of take us back to your childhood, early years of Manny, St. Victor.
You gonna charge me for therapy? Okay. Let's see. I was born in Brooklyn. I spent the first 7 years of my life living with my grandparents in Haiti because my parents were still in college. Then we moved to Freeport, New York, Long Island, and when I was 13, we moved to Florida. When I was after high school, well, actually during high school, I got recruited by Harvard for a program where they try out high school kids based off like SATs and whatever. So that was how I got familiar with the whole what was going on up there. And then I went to Harvard undergrad, took a few years off to launch a few attempts at businesses, then went back to Carolina for medical school, took a few more years off to attempt to launch businesses, and went back to residency to do my psychiatry residency. And after a couple of years of that, I was like, yeah, I need to give that business thing a try again, because it's one of those things where, and this goes back to limiting beliefs. I was being constrained in that path by a set of beliefs that it took quite a bit to undo.
Oh, very cool. But you're a work in process, a work in progress, and you're totally undoing. What were some of the most important influences? So it sounded like you lived in a lot of really cool places. So I know that was probably an influence. But what were some other like really important influences in your life?
I'd have to say that both of my parents have had a deep influence on me. My father was a big believer in neuroplasticity before it was called neuroplasticity. His mindset was always, you can do anything that you put your mind to. So when you get feedback, it's not time to get upset. It's time to pay attention to the feedback to adjust. So it was always like, okay, if I got obliterated by trying something really difficult, he'd be like, okay, well, let's look back through it and see when did you fall down and what step could we have taken differently. And that influenced me a lot. And my mom was like really, really big into intuition. Her thing was like, the answer is there if you just like become peaceful enough such that you're getting the signals from the environment, signals from the universe, signals from God. You know, you'll know where to go, because you know the universe and you are one. You're not separate. So she was really big on intuition like that. So I think that's one set of events. I think My experience working with Kosslyn, that was mind-blowing to me because I spent months lying in an MRI machine, and we realized that when people imagine certain stimuli, they map to the same place as if you're seeing them. And as a matter of fact, if someone is imagining something that's incorrect, they don't see the thing that's correct right in that same visual cortical space. And so it was like literally you can blind yourself to reality by what you're expecting. So I remember sitting in there like, oh yeah, this might be significant. And so I think that to me, even during my medical training, during my psychiatric training, I couldn't help but to think to myself, by putting a label on someone, am I kind of blinding them to their potential because I've told them you're an alcoholic, you're a borderline, you're whatever, in a context where I'm making money from this. So I'm very motivated to keep you on a monthly visit because it's part of my money. Making someone dependent on something that the more research I did in terms of evidence-based medicine, the more I found that if you didn't wrap the disease with the person's identity, they could overcome it. And that's the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, by the way. So.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely intense, Manny. What were some of your biggest challenges? You said initially you tried to start a couple of businesses, and I'm going to assume that they were failures for whatever reason. But what were some of the biggest challenges you've experienced in your life, and how did you ever overcome those challenges, and how does that affect your mindset now today?
I think the biggest challenge was waking up, because I grew up in a traditional type of Haitian household where my parents had the mindset that you're here in this country, you don't have the excuse of falling for the black stereotype as a reason to underachieve, so you should be able to do whatever you want to accomplish, which was positive. But at the same time, my parents at some point created a model where being a Harvard physician was success. And so I pursued that. And the metaphor I use is I leaned my ladder against the wrong house. So I was pursuing this, and I didn't know the difference between intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation then. So it was like, in order to keep myself going, it was like I was being motivated by my parents' joy in my success. But at a certain point in time, I had to kind of, like, as my other signals started coming in, where I started distrusting the way medicine was being practiced and stuff, there was several rounds of battle of, I don't say I don't like rich people, but I find that a lot of people stack a bunch of money, and I'm like, that's hoarding. If it wasn't money, you'd be medicated, and so that bothered me. And a lot of times the pathology around me where people were buying houses, buying cars, going through divorces, basically using external symbolic objects instead of looking inside and saying, I'm not happy. I kind of was like waking up to the fact that I was just as guilty of that, and beyond that, of projecting my unhappiness onto people and calling it a diagnosis. I'm like, you're depressed. Maybe I'm just a miserable bastard who likes labeling people depressed because Zoloft pays well. I mean, we had a delicious dinner at a really nice restaurant last night for Vilify. Maybe today's a good day to write a lot of Vilify. And I think pulling back from the doctor identity to see who I am without hiding behind Harvard, hiding behind medicine, hiding behind whatever, and just being vulnerable to someone sitting in a room with you and listening to the fact that they're telling you life was hard. They got addicted because of the environment, and hearing their story, hearing about the gunshots going through their houses and whatever, and not thinking, wonder if they'll have lobster at the farm dinner tonight. Oh, you're depressed, And after a while, that felt vapid. So that was the hardest part, because I lost a lot of close friends to that, because to them I abandoned our identity, because a lot of them who were tightly tied to their identity saw it as an attack on what they do instead of my attempt to individuate.
Wow. Okay, Manny. So that was a serious mind shift that you went through. when that happened, was it an epiphany, or was this something that happened over a period of time? And was there one thing that kind of broke the camel's back, or was it more of a process for you?
There are what I consider to be watershed moments when I realized this is not me. I believe in harmonious passion instead of obsessive passion. So if I'm doing something and I can't get into flow and I can't get immersed in it, then I'm wasting my life away. One case I remember, it was 5:30 in the morning. I was working ICU, and I had a guy. He had come in and he had been involved in a multiple rollover, and like in the rollover, both his legs had been like severed, and we were pumping fluid into him, and he was bleeding out the fluid at the same rate as we were pumping it in. So we were like, that's not going to end well. So we called his family in, and I remember basically his mom and dad came in. They were talking to him, and his mom let out like this shrill scream because I guess the dad was like, we had covered up his legs, but his dad was like, well, I want to see, typical dad style. So the dad pulled back the stuff we had covering it to see it, and I remember hearing the mother just like let out like a death scream, like someone had reached in and ripped her heart out through her mouth, basically. And then I remember that right then and there, I remember thinking two things. I was like, I have so much paperwork if this person dies on my shift.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I remember this lady was screaming, and I was like, okay, my shift ends in a couple hours. So much paperwork. You know, and then the second thing was I remember thinking like I had to fill out all the stuff, CYA protocol, like to make sure that, you know, if this death happened on my shift, that when we have something called morbidity and mortality, where you're in front of this panel of docs and they're just rapid firing you with all the questions in case it becomes something legal, the documents and whatever. And I just remember like thinking to myself, and this was when I was like, wow, I've lost a part of my humanity. And I was like, I just really wish this woman would shut up so I can concentrate on these paperwork. And I remember I went home that day and I was like, okay, that's not good. You know? And when I realized that when people were dying, I was looking at my watch more. Like, and sometimes I'll be like, okay, now what is it that I would need to do to make sure if I put a little epi in there, I should get me another 6 hours and I should be out by, my shift ends at 7. You know, and then you realize that you stopped doing the thing that you set out to do, and it's lost. You know, I was getting very good at covering my ass, very good at making things that were like. And I'll tell you another one. I was in surgery, and I remember that the doc that was there with me made a mistake and nicked something. And then later on, when I was writing the report, he corrected my report such that the patient came in with that wrong with them. Hmm. And he docked me some darn points for making an inaccurate report. And he's yelling at me at this thing because he's in reaction formation mode. He's doing the theatrics to make it sure that everyone remembers this mistake that I made so that later on when it comes into court, you could be like, well, no, remember we all had the discussion how Dr. St. Victor miswrote it. And he's like, do you remember that, Dr. St. Victor? And I'm looking at him, I'm like, oh, yeah, I know where you park your car. Events like that, after event after event, you know, putting people on medications because they were the new med that promised to work, and then seeing them decompensate, knowing that they were on another med that was less popular and had less delicious dinners. Stuff like that, like one piece at a time, you feel it chipping away at who you are.
Right. Okay. Wow, Manny. Well, all I can say is, wow, I appreciate you for being so transparent and just putting that out there. That's amazing. So, what was it after all of that? Was there one thing that happened that made you think, you know what, I just can't. Like, I need to do something different because I'm losing my soul. It sounded like you felt like you were just losing your soul, like you were losing your humanity. And there must have been something that said, you know what, I just can't.
Yeah, I did a shift where it was a 24-hour shift. Well, usually 24 ends up being 30 because you gotta make sure, you know. And it was a 24-hour shift, and I was covering like the VA hospital and the main hospital, Jackson Hospital. And trying to think, I was trying to remember why I was headed back over at Jackson because someone else was covering Jackson, but I had to run over to Jackson for a couple of things. I think it was some paperwork from earlier. I wasn't covering Jackson, but I remember going over to Jackson in the middle of the night through the Miami, like where all the homeless people live and stuff, and are waiting for the guy that just kicked them out of the psych unit and didn't give them the free meal. You know, so it was like this death walk that you do from one hospital to the other under a bridge and whatever. And I had finished that 24-hour shift, and during that shift, it's like at the beginning of every shift, if it's a weekend shift, you get a bunch of like drunk and homeless people trying to work their way in, and there's the paperwork that you have to do for each person just makes you like it makes you like really dislike another human and forget that they're suffering and coping, and you know, being alcoholic enough where you're homeless is actually mental illness. Is the definition of bottoming out. But the fact that they play this game, and then when you get them out by morning, because usually all they're looking for is breakfast, and then now if you're doing the right 24-hour shift and it's a weekend, and then they come right back in the next night, and you're used to seeing them for a couple of weeks, and then some of them are willing to go to jail because the food there and the shelter there is better than being out on the street on a rainy night, and they're comfortable and have friends there. And yeah, after a 24-hour shift of that, I think it was shift ended at 7, and I remember I walked out to my car, I looked out in the sun, I was like, that's, you know, and I've been programming software since I was 10, and I was actually building up a consultancy at night where, in this particular case, I'll generalize it, a company that we all know that has a mouse as their mascot was building a virtual world, and the person that connected me with that deal had a deal in Atlanta that was paying like $150,000. So it was a pay cut, but it wasn't going to kill me. You know, that company shut down in 6 months. By the way, 6 months after I moved my family here, that company went belly up. Yeah. So then there was another drop in revenue where like software engineers there were, I think at that point it went down to 120,000, and it was like, okay, yeah, and then another company, and then, you know, and it was like, okay, this trend is that like every software skill gets, like, as more people learn it, it gets less worth something. And so then during that period, I doubted my decision to leave because I had a family to care for. But I think that's when I woke up that it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to do software, it was that I just really didn't want to be in a hospital, you know. And it took me a while to realize that the reason I was so into the software was, and as I learned artificial intelligence, it became clear that you go back to the roots of cognitive computing, real artificial intelligence, and it is neuroscience. It created brains, you know, in a machine. So that was the draw, and it took me a while to realize that that's why both things were so appealing to me. And I wasn't learning it writing prescriptions.
Right. Cool. Okay. So with all of that said, Manny, what would you say, like right now, today, what is your life vision? What is your mission? What is your purpose in life now?
To help people become conscious, to help people become aware of their potential, and to realize that if something got you from being an egg and a sperm to being an irritating toddler to being a pain in the butt adolescent to being an adult in love or whatever, and to being an older person, maybe if you got to know that thing, you could do some things with it. People would be like, well, it's all in your head. I'm like, it's all in my head. Duh. You know, you hit puberty because your neuroendocrine system makes some changes. Guess what? If you stress someone enough, you can stunt their puberty. guess what? If you stress someone enough, you can cause onset of stuff that looks like pregnancy. If you stress someone enough, they end up having accelerated aging. It's all in your head. And putting people in a category because it's convenient and because Big Pharma is making a killing off of the hard human condition is a mess. And I think part of what I want to do is like show people that just by knowing your brain the same way you know how your arm and your leg work, you wouldn't try to pick up a spoon with your elbow, yet you're sitting around trying to think through the wrong part of your brain and destroying your sense of self-worth by thinking that something is wrong with you when it's just something that people learn when they go to Ivy League school. They learn in engineering school. People learn critical reasoning. People learn emotional intelligence once they hit a certain socioeconomic level. They learn coping skills. Yet when you're below that level, you're an opportunity for another business model.
Right. Yeah. And who wants to be an opportunity for a business model when we're human beings, right?
Yeah.
So I want Kristen to hashtag it's all in your head, Kristen. It's all in your head. That was a great comment. So Manny, so if somebody watching today or any of us on the panel, there's always something that we need to shift in order to do better and be better. We're all work in progress. We're all continuously improving ourselves. Not all of us, but all of us who want to do better. What's kind of like the first step to improving our consciousness?
The first step is realizing the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset thinks that you can't change your brain. It's from the era where they told us once you're an adult, there was no neuroplasticity, when learning is neuroplasticity. Anything you practice is neuroplasticity. So that's the first step. The way you can tell which of the two frames you're in is, and Carol Dweck wrote a great book about this, about mindset, but the way you can tell which one you're in is how you respond to feedback. If someone provides you with feedback and you go into identity threat where you want to rip their effing face off, then you probably have a sort of a fixed mindset where you take the feedback, and the way to think about it is, what are the emotions? The emotion that you have, and this is sort of how the fixed beliefs work, like limiting fixed beliefs, where you go into shame. Shame drains your identity, and that happens when someone imposes their values on you. Some people call it being defined from the outside in. If your parents raised you where instead of telling you to make your decisions based on your core values and trusting you to have integrity, they instead embedded in you this voice that criticizes everything you do. So you walk around with this internal model that all day long is like hitting you over the head. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. The problem with don't do that is it activates your fight, flight, freeze. It doesn't give you something to do. And a lot of people get stuck in don't do that. And as a matter of fact, they sit in there and you can see it firing in your brain, and it's called ruminating, where they sit there and they're like, I'm an awful person, life sucks, things will never be any better, I always mess up, and they get into this loop where they can't get out. It's like spiraling around the toilet bowl or something, you know? Sorry for anyone who doesn't want to visualize that. But so the next step is, once you realize that when you're stuck in shame, that means you've internalized some criticism into your identity, and you feel as if you can't get rid of that. It's like having a chip on your shoulder. You move from shame to guilt. When you move to guilt, what happens is that you realize that your action is separate from the individual, and then you create a habit of figuring out which actions are not consistent with your core values. And you do that by bringing up what you value at every juncture when a decision matters. And there's some steps for doing it, for embedding that in your unconscious mind, but that's sort of further on. But so in guilt, you get into the habit of recognizing things that you do that you feel guilty about. Now, once you feel guilty about something, it's usually after you've done it, and what you want to do then is start to learn to feel regret. When you regret doing something, it feels kind of bad, if you don't take the time to take the regret as an opportunity to set a what they call an implementation intention or an avoidance, I think, a distraction intention. If you're addicted to something and it's like always throwing you off track, then you want to put unconscious if-then statements so that your unconscious mind runs on autopilot. You put if-then statements. Next time I hit the corner where I go use crack, I will keep driving straight after taking 3 deep breaths. Now, every time you mess up, you regret it, but you mark in your brain where you're falling down. And then the next time, you mark somewhere earlier so that you might change your whole route. In a relationship, you might pick a different archetype because certain people are automatically aroused by a certain archetype they think is love, but what they're doing is they're kicking a script that will always end in the way that the previous relationship has ended. And that's sort of a limiting belief as well, that people always leave me, people always whatever. It all follows that same arc. So the regret allows you to set the implementation intentions, which allow you to not use willpower and white knuckling it, as they call it, in order to make a change in your behavior. So now, going all the way back to the guilt aspect, when you're stressed, you go into autopilot, and what happens is you have what's called thought-action fusion. This is where you end up making beliefs that are not true, but that control your life, basically. Sometimes they call them schema behaviors. Somebody does something, you feel shame, and you go right into a rage because you don't want to be stuck in ruminating. You remember how much you hated being stuck in the ruminating loop. So as soon as you feel the shame, you rage out, because rage is an approach behavior versus an avoid behavior. So in order to try to push yourself out, you overdo it. And some people, instead of overdoing it with rage, what they do is they project the rage onto other people. They imagine someone else is angry, imagine someone else is attacking them, and they go into a victim role, which is also an avoid road. So it's those dynamics, once you take the time to get to know yourself and be mindful, that allow you to take back the power and develop free will, because free will is more about controlling your environment than controlling your ability to resist temptation.
Yeah, you know what? That's interesting. I'm going to turn this over to the panel in a minute, but I want to ask you one more question. So I want to clarify for our audience what the difference is between mindset and mindfulness, and when each one becomes important, and how you use each one to make improvements.
Okay. Mindset, if you want to get, I like everything in numbers. Okay, your unconscious mind works on a principle, and anyone wants to geek out, is a set theory. Okay, so when you see an environment, based on what you notice in the environment that you perceive to be relevant, most salient, you activate a set of representations, the ones that you think are most likely, and that's what your unconscious mind does. Like, for example, if I say the word bank, as I give you more evidence, your brain has activated bank for river, bank where money is, and whatever other meanings of bank you have, until it accumulates enough when one fires off. Now, same metaphor in your mindset. There's multiple mindsets. There's implementation mindset, which is focused on what are the tasks that I can do to get to the goal, and you can activate that by core values. The other is state mindset, and this is where you ruminate. Your attention is stuck on this loop of, I feel awful, I'm an awful person, this always happens to me. And after you spend a while there, you're taking your wiring and you're making it that you're caught in this loop. If you look in your brain, you'll see that it's myelinated, so that this becomes where your brain goes immediately. Instead of, what can I do to get out of here? You end up in that state. So those are two mindsets. As far as mindfulness is about waking up to your emotions, so that there's this thing called name it, tame it. So if you say, I'm angry, what you've done is you've taken your feelings from your unconscious mind, where it's uncertain, being calculated, to your conscious mind. Now, with mindfulness, you're able to identify an emotion but not ride the wave of it. You don't use, like, I'm angry, but you don't see red, like some people like see red. Some people like black out and stuff happened, and they look back and it happened, and then they go into self-destructive behavior where they don't feel like they have control of themselves. So by mindfulness is when you see an emotion, and I visualize it like I'm in the middle of a pool or whatever, and the emotions show up with like sort of in concentric circles. So you gotta be on the lookout because some of them sneak up on you. That's kind of the metaphor I use. It works for me. So when you start to see the emotion coming, if you see it or see the triggers for it far enough away, you can label it. And if you know it approaches slowly because you're attending to it, you have more choices versus when it shows up here and it's a trigger, it's autopilot. And that applies to just about anything that has you having avoidance behavior or trick or schema behavior. So mindfulness gives you the ability to do what's called cognitive reappraisal. Cognitive reappraisal is when you, it's called reframing also. When one meaning happens and you don't like that meaning, you can lift yourself out of the cascade of emotions, rage, self-destruction, self-sabotage that goes with that meaning. Like if you realize, like a lot of people are triggered by arguments with their wives and they take off down the highway driving like an asshat, you know, or whatever. They might run off to their mistress's house and look what you made me do. Okay, guy. So let's check out the belief that the second she does such and such, you wake up at your mistress's house. Let's look at the pieces along the way. Did you notice that you were driving? Yeah. So you can drive halfway there and stop on the side of the road and evaluate whether this is how you want to spend the rest of this relationship. You know, you can stop in the garage and depending on if this is a person who's working with you also so that she's not coming out there and throwing stuff at your windshield, you know, usually you have a dynamic with two people that are triggering each other. So you want the person to step away from the triggering environment and think about the script. In the middle of your scripts, start popping into a mindful state. Like, I'm so mad, I hate her, 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 I hate her. Okay, let's kind of flash forward and think about the last time you hated her this bad. Were you able to get over it the next day when you were apologizing, buying expensive jewelry, if that's your script? You know, apologizing to the kids, you know, getting them toys because they watched you like knock mom across the room or whatever. It's like, it's evaluating then kind of into the future, getting yourself out of that rut. That's what the mindfulness does. It lets you look at possibilities for reality. And that's where agency kicks in. You're like, okay, well, what if it was the reality that I wanted? What if I developed an optimistic mindset? And as soon as you develop an optimistic mindset, you attract optimistic people. When people are negative, after a while, you're like, yo, you are really negative. And if they choose to continue to be negative, you choose to let that wither on the vine. And anyone that's devaluing you based off what you value, they don't want to listen to it, you drop them off. You don't need that. They're never going to change because that's their identity. And so you start to focus on who you have in your circles. You learn how to deal with family in a way such that you're like, yeah, mom, you're mom, but this is not healthy, you know. And you kind of lay what's called your psychic boundary, where you stop taking the definition. Okay, you go from being ashamed because this is the most trusted figure in your life to feeling guilty that you're letting her destroy your sense of self-worth. You know, and you might say something as simple as, you know, I really wish you wouldn't tell me I should be ashamed so much. It's destroying me.
Right.
So that was a long, circuitous answer.
Right. No, that was good. That was exactly what I was looking for. So now I want to throw it over to Christine. Christine, do you have any comments, any questions for Manny? Maybe if you could give, Christine, if you could give us a personal example where you had to shift your mindset in order to make the change that you wanted in your life.
Wow. Well, Manny and I are on the same page. That's why he's one of my favorite people on the Plus. We clicked immediately because for me, mindset is everything. And I just commented, not to take anything away from you, Dr. Manny, but it's amazing how information that's coming from a certain source, even in this kind of scenario, is accepted as true for you just because of the credentials of that source. It's just a thought that came to mind, and for me, it's a case in point. Manny speaks volumes to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to necessarily apply to someone else. So we have to filter information every single day. To me, that's mindfulness. Being aware of your surroundings, auditorily, visually, emotionally, and filter those based on your values. So for me, that's what I do on a daily basis. Every single morning, I read information that allows me to stick to my core values and allows me to create what I call a positive mindset. I do believe in the power of positive thinking. That's one of my favorite books by Norman Vincent Peale, and I choose to share that with my online network. I think it's a way to help others. I think someone asked in the audience, are there specific exercises that we can do? To me, that's the best thing we can do for ourselves, is to purposely gather information and consume information that's going to allow us to have the best mindset possible based on our values. So that's what I do for myself.
Cool. And what got you to this place? Again, like Manny, was it an epiphany that got you to where you are now, or was it a process? And if you could just maybe talk us through a little bit of your story, so we can get to know you a little bit better, that would be awesome.
Oh, I appreciate that. It is a process. It's a daily process to me. Actually, a moment by moment process. However, there was an epiphany, if you will. My mom, when I entered the industry that brought me into entrepreneurship network marketing, and I reached one of the first positions, leadership positions in the company, she gave me a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Mm-hmm. And that book it used to be my #2 book on my top 5. Now it's #3. Napoleon Hill is definitely my mindset mentor. And reading that book and the subsequent books since has just opened my eyes to the power of mindset. And through the journey, I've learned that my purpose here is to help others also become mindful and aware of their mindset, because again, that is the foundation for the circumstance and the life that we live. So it is a daily process though, because there's a battle going on in the mindset. You know, we have to filter that social, external, even internal voices and filter those and release, if you will, the things that will allow us to create a better life for ourselves. So I hope that answers the question, but that's my journey. It's a daily process.
Yeah, I think that's important, because mindset, again, is like a continuous improvement in ourselves, right? Because it's so easy. We can so easily be on top and just have something happen, and it pulls us right down into the gutter. And if we don't wrap our heads around it quickly, we can live in the gutter, right? We can stay there. We can just live in the gutter, and it's so much easier, honestly, to live in the gutter. I mean, you just have to turn your head around and get it straight. Kristen, I'm gonna come to you. Let's see if we have better volume now.
All right. Let's see. How is it?
Hey. Good morning, Kristen. How's it going?
Morning. Good. Great. Yeah. I'm excited to be here and be part of this. I try to follow Manny pretty closely, and he definitely aligns with my goals and trying to help the people that I want to help. So, yeah, this is a good thing to be here. Let me see. What did you want me to answer?
Yeah. So I have a question for you, Kristen. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and you can not answer, or you can answer partially or whatever, but I know that you've gone through some things recently, and you don't need to tell exactly what it was, but I know that in order for you to make a change, it was very significant for you. You had to change your mindset. So maybe if you can talk, you don't have to share the incident, but maybe if you can just talk a little bit about your mindset and what changed, what was it that really put your mindset in the right place for you to do the right thing for you?
Okay, so I would love to say that it was any one particular person that did this, but of course it's a culmination of falling down, getting back up, and falling down and getting back up again. I do remember a specific moment in which I realized all this falling down and getting back up is not helping the people that I want to help, because I tend to forget about myself. I'm a woman. I'm a nurturer. I put myself, behind everyone else, which is naturally. I think women do that naturally. So having that mindset, it took for me to realize that what I was doing was enabling other people in their own bad habits, their problems, their issues. And the moment that I decided I was going to let go of that, I was able to find me and find what I wanted to do. And that's where it's going to happen. That's where the hard work is going to happen. That's where the miracles are going to happen, is inside me. And then I just need to let that project out. And that's the only way that we can really help anyone else, is when we're true to ourselves, when we're aligned.
You know what? And that's an amazing epiphany, because I think that says volumes, Kristen. We have to first, if we're going to help other people, I think everyone on this panel, including hopefully our guests, is we're all of a mindset that we have a mission to help people in life. But before we can do that, we have to take the, if, for example, if the plane were to lose cabin pressure and we have people, seated beside us who need assistance, in order to assist them, we need to take that oxygen mask and we need to breathe in the oxygen, and we need to help ourselves before we can be any good to anybody else. So I can't give you enough kudos, Kristen, that you got into the right mindset, that you got in a position where you're in a way being a little bit selfish, but in a better way you're being 100% unselfish, because you realize that in order for me to do what I need to do to follow my vision and my passion, I have to take care of me first. I have to get myself in the right mindset to do that. And you made a life-changing decision. And how's it working for you?
Great. It's all about positioning and perspective. Because if you position yourself in a way that you can see from here to your end goal, sometimes we can't even see it. Sometimes it's larger than what our own scope is. And I think that's probably what happens a lot of times with people that achieve so much, is they're trying to get to one place, but they may not even see all the ramifications of that. But yeah, I've seen amazing things happen just within the last week. Doors have been opening, and yeah, it's definitely worth it to take that perspective, that moment for yourself to breathe through it and give that gift to you.
Awesome. Well, you know what, Kristen, we are so happy that you gave yourself a gift, because by doing that, you're giving us all a gift as well. So kudos. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, so now our guest, our experiment, and our guinea pig, Benton. Hey, Benton, how's it going?
Good.
Okay. Yeah, again, welcome to Get Busy. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. So you agreed to come on the show. Both Manny and I were looking for somebody who might have a limiting belief that they want to get over right here, right now, today. So what we would like to do on the show is talk to you a little bit about your limiting belief. In the green room, you talked about that it was almost serendipity that you came on the show today, because one of the things that you really, really want to do is you really want to change your career path. And so what we'd like to do on the show today is help you shift your mindset, think about your mindset, and shift it in such a way that that will actually happen for you, okay? So maybe if you want to give us and give the audience a little bit of background on your career. I think another thing that you said is you're working with a career coach and you got to a certain point and some of your limiting beliefs, which by the way we all have, we all struggle with. I think I said earlier when you were talking about this is welcome to the human race, because literally we all have the same issue that you're struggling with in our own way. So but with that said, maybe tell us a little bit about what you want to do from a career change perspective and some of the limiting beliefs that have been haunting you a little bit.
Okay. Well, I'm a happily married man, and I have a wife and a beautiful daughter, 9 years old, and a bonus daughter who's 21. And as you said, James, I work for Starbucks. I've been working for Starbucks for 14 years. I worked my way up to a manager. I was actually going to school in psychology back at LSU a long time ago, and I was actually going to go into neuroscience, Manny. So I think that's where I started following you. But anyway, I stepped down I think it was 3 years ago now, from being a manager because I was losing my soul. I was having to do things that I did not agree with. I also had a boss who I felt was basically had it out for me, and basically I didn't do anything right. And I said, well, I'm not doing this anymore. I do like I have always liked working with Starbucks, obviously, so I worked for many years there. I still enjoy it, but at the same time, I go to work. I'm happy to go to work. I don't mind going to work, but when I get there and I see this or that, I'm like, oh, geez, not this, not that. Come on, and that's very frustrating to me because I can be a complainer, but I definitely like to be more optimistic. I'm an optimistic person. I have big dreams, or I have great ideas and all that. I want to do those things. So as you mentioned, I am working with a career coach. I've been working with them for about 4 months now, and about 2 months ago, we were getting into some really good discussions about what I want to do and what I'm interested in, and we got to this one part where we were talking about something that I was semi-interested in, but a part of me was going, I don't know. And I ended up not severing communications with them, but I sort of avoided them for a period of a few weeks. And, looking back at it, it was a very typical thing for me is if I don't look at it, I don't have to deal with it. I'm sure a lot of people are like that too. But I've run across several times in my life where I've had issues where I'm coming up to something that could possibly be great, something that I know I want to do, but what ends up happening is I do something that doesn't get me there. I do something either opposite or off track, or again, even avoiding it. And we just recently, me and the career coach are working together again, and we've actually just come on to something, a really great idea that really, with our discussions that we've talked about with my interests, my skills, what I could see doing for a good period of time, we've come across something that really fits. And, looking back at, a couple of months ago, I'm thinking, oh man, I don't want to screw this up. I don't want to do that, and I've been trying to be very mindful of what my thoughts are and trying to take actions that sort of sometimes, I guess what would you call it, sort of override the thoughts. I'm not really thinking about them a whole lot, just because of, life, busy schedule, what have you. But I'm trying to do action so that even though I'm having the thoughts, I'm still doing what I need to do to get there. And, I know I've seen Manny mention stuff about habits on posting about habits and how to create good habits. So, I've tried to take that into account. And so basically, I'm actually in the planning stages of doing this right now. I've got an idea. I even said to my career coach last week, I said, I know myself. I am going to take this. I'm not going to put out the most perfect thing this time. I'm going to have fun with this. Because what happens for me is I know if I can't get it perfect or exactly the way I want, I most likely will, sabotage it or let it go or do something else or avoid it. So, I purposely said to him, I said, I'm going to have fun with this. This is just going to be a trial run. This is a practice, and we'll go from there. I'm trying hard to be careful about avoiding those limiting beliefs that I have.
And what is one of your, just one, give me just one of your limiting beliefs.
I think probably my limiting belief is I'm not going to be happy if it is not exactly the way I want or picture it, especially more about picturing it, because what I'll do is I'll imagine about like where I want to go, my goal. And I'll be like, oh yeah, that's going to be awesome if we could do that, and I'll do it exactly like this. But then I'll go, oh, but you know what? I don't know if I like that part right there. Oh, but if I did, and if I don't like that part, I won't like this thing happening, and then I have to make a decision about this, and I'm not going to go bother. It definitely becomes like my picture in my head is too good to be true. So.
Okay, I'm gonna turn this over to Manny, but I have a couple of comments. So number one, and I do this myself, so I'm not speaking out of. One of the things you're doing is you're self-sabotaging, and so we're gonna explore that a little bit with Manny, and figure out why that happens. For me, and I think for most people, it comes back to some abuse by verbal abuse. For me, it's verbal abuse that I experienced from my dad that was severe and ridiculous, actually. And it's affected me for my whole life. And so for me, that's where a lot of my personal self-sabotage comes from. The other thing that you said, well, number one, I want to point out to you that you have definitely done a mindset shift. When you decided, you know what, I'm going to have fun with this time, that's a mindset shift, and that's very, very positive. It's a very positive thing. So you're already heading in the right direction. So I want to give you accolades for that, because sometimes that is part of the hardest part. But I want to explore the self-sabotage, and I want to turn it over to Manny. So Manny, what comments and maybe questions do you have for Benton?
The first thing that stands out is usually the most important part of self-sabotage is self-sabotage, the self part. Okay? What happens is often when we're in our current culture, when you're doing well at a job, they promote you to another job, which should be a reward, but it's a change in roles. It's a change in your relationship with the people at the place. It's a change in the way they expect you to feel, the way you're expected to behave. And sometimes they call it emotional labor, where they're giving you more money, but now they're asking you to become a different person, which is contrary to who you are. Treat people a certain way because it's your job. It's just doing my job, sir, is the excuse a lot of people do as they're destroying their sense of individuality. So the best way to approach that is, the most effective way is to kind of think of, your brain makes categories for roles, okay? So when you take a role and you make it what's called self-relevant, where you make that role part of your identity, your version of that role can kind of like bring yourself down and be like, I can't believe I'm this guy, But what helps with that to avoid self-sabotage has different elements to it. A role that's not ego-synchronic, which is not aligned with your core values, every time you do the things you have to do, you're draining yourself because you're going against what you should be doing. You're not able to trust yourself in decisions. So one thing is, when we make categories in our brains of roles, we create sort of an archetypal role of what it is. Now, there's a possibility that you created a role for leadership that, although it's labeled leader and labeled promotion, has a negative valence because last time you got a promotion, it wasn't like you thought it would be. So if you create different categories of what it would mean to succeed and be promoted, and this takes actual conscious effort, so that you start visualizing next time you have an opportunity that's a promotion, what you want to do is visualize it, but realize two things. That you realize now that one of the things that's important to you is like individuality, maybe self-expression. You know, there's some different value systems around there, so it's kind of vaguish, and you'd have to feel that part out yourself. But figure out the thing that you value, that you see threatened in the promotion, in the definition of the role as it exists, and then make a mindful decision at that point to take the role and see how you can individuate the role such that it has not just the role, but your signature on it, and you can perform the role to the best of your ability, consistent with who you are.
Hey, Ben, and with that feedback from Manny, do you have any questions for him, or does it provide any insight like into your soul?
Actually, you know, it's interesting that you said that, Manny, because when I worked my way up to becoming a manager, I definitely think I had that kind of mindset. I knew I had certain, you know, people, you know, certain peers I had come into contact that, you know, we had different views of, like, say, either how to be a manager or, you know, what Starbucks, life in Starbucks looked like. And I was pretty confident, you know, hey, you know, I believe these things. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to put my stamp on this. I'm going to take what Starbucks says, and this is how we're going to do it. And I don't know where it went off the rails. I don't know. I mean, I can point to that probably part of it was me. I do know, you know, I probably maybe got comfortable in my position because I was a manager for, what, 4 years. So, you know, it was around the third year that I really, I mean, at the end of the third year, the beginning of the fourth year, that I was like, this isn't for me. So obviously, you know, I think there was some loss of mindfulness from my end. At the same time, I do know there were changes in the company too that I definitely couldn't deal with, so to say. But I can definitely understand how what you were saying defeats that self-sabotage. You know, I mean, I wasn't thinking about it that way because, you know, I mean, I see myself as, you know, when I accomplished the goal of being a manager, yeah, I did it, you know, great. But I never thought about it as, hey, I also defeated my self-sabotage too. You know, I've never thought about it that way. I just did it. So.
Okay, and do you have any? Do you have? Well, let me say this because maybe we shouldn't have thrown out the name of the company. I absolutely don't want you to get in any trouble at all with the company that you're working for. So let me just say this, that Starbucks is an awesome and amazing company. I know that you enjoy your job there to the fullest, and you want to do everything that you can to be the best employee for that company as you can, and that's one of the reasons why we're talking to you, so that you can do so that you can bring it big every single day for that company. So totally don't want you to get into any kind of trouble at all. You know, for this, we're doing this to improve your lot in life, not make it more difficult. But anyways, with all of that said, do you have any questions for Manny? Based on some of the feedback that he gave you.
A question I would have would be, what kinds of things should, I guess, I don't know if the best way to put it, but what should I be telling myself, or how should I be talking to myself in dealing with, you know, being at like tipping point, so to say, Like, I'm obviously getting to a tipping point, right now. And what should I be talking? How should I be talking to myself? What should I be saying? What are some like? I know there's not like a simple answer, but
Yeah, what happens is usually a tipping point is a battle between what's called top-down, which is goal-directed processing, and environmental mediated processing, like temptations, threats, stuff that override your brain. What you want to do is start visualizing the tipping point and the steps before the tipping point, like almost every day, to the point where it loses the element of uncertainty. Like after you repeat a vision enough times, you know that you'll recognize it. When you get there, you know that you practice the steps in your head that you'll do. And when you get there, it's like, well, it's showtime. I've practiced this. And you want to get to where you give yourself more opportunities to make different decisions by stepping further and further and further away from the tipping point in your thought process and seeing where you can put unconscious markers, implementation intentions, like if-thens in your brain. Like if I wake up in the morning before work and if one of the things you're doing is you're going in late because you're no longer enjoying it, you're like, if I find myself doing that, I'm going to go ahead and set my alarm, set another alarm across the room. If what you're doing is, a lot of people self-sabotage the night before with friends, they might drink up before a stressful event and call it celebrating or whatever to ease the stress. But mark that event the night before and maybe come up with a running behavior or something different. So you're kind of going back in time and finding different points where you're less likely to pivot to the to the self-sabotage. And during those points, if you set up, anytime your brain makes a choice, it empowers your sense of agency. And there's a part of your brain called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex that actually sparks your self-esteem level. So the further back you start putting these things, the more you feel self-efficacy is what they call it. So you feel like you have control of your life because you didn't put yourself in this situation. You didn't put yourself in this situation and this situation. All those situations end up being a little pat on the back to yourself. Hey, I did the thing that I said I would do to prevent this. So you're using the proactive instead of the reactive part of your brain. And you start to trust yourself more. So when the stressors do come up, you have all this rescue built up because you've put all those things on autopilot, and you're able to face that stressor with all the energy of those conscious decisions that normally you wouldn't have set autopilot for. So that's how you're supposed to use your brain. You're supposed to set so much autopilot that when you do hit a challenge, you're fresh because everything else has been like going on autopilot. It should be that, like you're in the shower, you're not thinking to yourself, scrub counterclockwise, use towel, right hand, throw over shoulder, scrub, tilt slightly. You create, and it's called chunking in your working memory. You create scripts, and when you have scripts that don't work well, you go back and you change them. That's when you put the attention on that. You're like, when I take my shower, and I like to do stupid stuff like this just for shiggles, just to keep my brain active. I'm like, okay, this week I'm going to switch to the habit of drying this way, and then you reward yourself for like something like that doesn't have a cataclysmic consequence if you fail. And then, when you play video games, say, okay, I'm going to play for 30 minutes. And 30 minutes on the dot, you stop playing. You pick things that no one is outside shaming you for failing, and you do them a lot. And that trains your working memory as well as your VMPFC.
Wow, that's superb advice, Manny. So let me ask you, Benton, we're going to have to close it out here because we're running a little bit over. But was this helpful for you?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it's very helpful. Wow.
Cool.
Yeah, I think one, to give me some confidence, with the changes that I'm trying to make in my life, and then with what Manny just said, I think I can remember times in my life where I did those kinds of things, like changing how I brush my teeth, brush it with my left hand, and just for the heck of it. But I think that I can relate to that very well, and I think I could easily see that helping me be more mindful of what I'm doing and help be aware of myself, and so I can always change my mindset to be more optimistic, like say at work or with my career changing. Yeah, that's definitely.
So Ben, I'd like to throw this out. So what I'd like to do with you is have a follow-up. So in about a month or 6 weeks,
Okay.
I'd love to have you come back on the show, and we're going to focus that entire show on you that day, and we're going to talk about what's happened since today, the good, the bad, the ugly. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure it won't all be positive, but I want to talk with you about what's transpired from today to 6 weeks from now, and kind of regroup with you. So would that be cool?
Yes, that would be great. I'd be up for that.
Is it cheating if I help him along the way?
No, it's not actually. No, it's not. Not at all. No, I'm sure Benton would like totally appreciate that. So, I think Benton, a life-changing day is in store for you today on September the 2nd, 2014. So congratulations, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
And okay, so I'd like to close out the show. Typically, I'll start with you, Benton. So any last thoughts for you regarding today's show or what's happened or what's transpired? Any last thoughts?
I'd just say thank y'all for taking the time out of y'all's busy schedules, I'm sure, to do this. I think it's pretty cool that I've been lucky enough to be the volunteer, the guinea pig. But hopefully with all of this, we can help everybody who's been watching today. I mean, that's pretty cool to be a part of that.
You know what, Benton? You stepped up, and because you stepped up, this is what happens in life. When you step up, you volunteered, you took a risk, you put it out there in front of the whole world, and this is what happens when you do that. So, Christine.
Yes. Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me here. There's so much more that we could discuss and go like another hour.
Wow.
I want to thank you for having me on the show. Thanks to Benton for your transparency. That's awesome. And you too, Kristen. And me personally, I I don't share my vulnerabilities through HOAs. You can catch them through my videos and my posts. I'm very transparent with my journey, and I hope that this segment here, thanks to Dr. Manny and Jim for you putting this together, will help individuals on their path with the proper mindset. That's my wish for everyone.
Awesome. We love you, Christine. And you can come on anytime and hang out with us. Kristen?
I'm going to say create the commitment and accept the changes that are required. Just do it.
Hey, and I want another hashtag, if you wouldn't mind for me. Manny said something that I really loved, and he said something along the line of "just for shiggles." Hashtag that. Hashtag just for shiggles. Love that. Hashtag of the day. And hey, Manny, again, thank you for being here today. So much value in today's show. And anything that you'd like to say in closing?
Well, thanks for having me on, Jim. I appreciate it. And thank you. I'm grateful that I'm able to help.
Awesome. And where can people find, if they want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Mindful360.com.
Mindful360.com. Awesome. Okay, well, this has been a great show, everybody. I appreciate the audience for hanging in there with us. I appreciate you, Benton, for stepping up today and coming on the show. We didn't know how it was going to turn out, but I think it turned out really, really well. Thank you, Christine and Kristen. Thank you, Dream audience. I see that there was a lot of engagement going on. I'm anxious to go back and look at the comments and see what's happening. So take care, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you again next week on Get Busy. Thank you, guys.